Chapter 36 of Mr. Wicker's Window. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Ian Gray. Mr. Wicker's Window by Carley Dawson. Chapter 36. The shop was dark, but headlights flashed by out on Wisconsin Avenue, glaring over the meager display of objects in Mr. Wicker's window. There seemed even fewer objects than before, Chris thought, for the carved figure of the Nubian boy was gone, and so was the coil of dusty rope. The ship in the glass bottle was still there, however. Mr. Wicker went forward in the darkness and leaned over, took up the bottle with care from where it had lain for so many years, dusted and polished only by the loving eyes of a boy who had often pressed his nose against the Georgian panes. "You are to have this," Mr. Wicker said, putting the bottle with its delicate contents in both Chris's hands. "Both Ned and I would like to know that it is yours." He turned to put his hand on the doorknob. Chris found his voice. "What about the job, sir?" he broke out. "Can Jakey Harris apply for it?" Mr. Wicker smiled, and it was strange. In that dim room inconsistently lit by the lights of passing cars, Mr. Wicker looked exactly like a venerable, wizened old man, when Chris knew perfectly well he was not. "It's peculiar," he thought, "the tricks your eyes play on you. Guess I'm tired." "Jakey Harris for the job?" Mr. Wicker remarked. "Why, no, there is no job to fill. You filled it, Christopher." All at once, without any goodbye, Chris found himself outside on the top step. The din of cars and honking horns rushed at him like a gape-mouthed monster. The drumming whine and roar from the freeway shook the ground, and up ahead the lights from the People's Drug Store looked garish but friendly. Across the way, as he turned to go home, Chris glanced at the two tumble-down storehouses opposite, the winch and tackle broken, and panes of glass missing from the windows. As he reached the corner of Wisconsin and M Street, Mike rushed breathlessly up. "Hey, here I am! Not much later than I said it'd be, either. What you got?" he asked, falling into step beside Chris and looking down at the bottle. "Mr. Wicker gave it to me," Chris replied in a colorless voice. "What for?" "I don't know. I guess he didn't need it." A silence fell, and then Mike said, as they passed the strong light of the shop window, returning down bustling M Street toward 28th, "Say, you been running? Or sitting by a fire? You look almost sunburnt. And look." They stopped dead, while Mike put a grubby forefinger on a mark on Chris's jaw. "I never noticed that before. It shows up white and plain. Must have been a pretty deep cut you had there." For the first time in what felt like hours, Chris smiled, and the smile became a grin. "It sure was," he said reminiscently. "Oh, and by the way," Mike said much farther along as he left Chris to go on to his own house, "your Aunt Rachel called my ma and told her your mother was so much better she could come home soon. Seems that your father's on his way back, too." He walked off and then turned to call from a quarter block away, "Bet you'll be glad to have your own folks at home." Chris's grin deepened, but he did not reply, nor even wave, for fear of dropping the bottle. N Street, then Dumbarton Avenue, dropped behind him, and he came to Happy's grocery store with the bookstore on the opposite corner. He stood looking at his lighted windows, the lighted windows of his house, remembering a time when he and Amos had seen only a wooded ridge and a burnt-out campfire. Something stirred in his mind, and after finding the front door unlatched, he eased himself in and up the stairs as quietly as he could. He did not want to face his Aunt Rachel for a few minutes longer. In his own room he shut the door and carefully lifted the Mirabelle in its bottle to the place of honor on top of his chest of drawers. Then he stood looking at his reflection in the small mirror hung askew near the window. He looked the same. Well, not quite. The tiny scar was there, to prove it was not a dream, and he quickly undid his shirt and pulled it off, got up on a chair to peer over his shoulder to see how his back looked in the square of glass. A whiplash like a long, clean briar tear lay across his shoulders, and as he looked, he almost felt again the searing cut. Chris grinned, buttoning up his shirt. Then it had been no dream, no childish imagining. A voice soared up the stairs. "Chris! Chris, darling, are you home?" Aunt Rachel had news for him of his mother's imminent return. Chris opened his bedroom door, pulling out from his pocket the first thing his fingers hit on, and as he went downstairs whistling "Farewell and Adieu to You Spanish Ladies," he tossed and caught again an old silver button burnt black in a fire. End of chapter 36. Recording by Ian Gray. End of Mr. Wicker's Window by Carley Dawson.